Okay, let's talk about the Book of Erotic Fantasy. This might be the most infamous piece of D&D content ever created. And here's my copy. Just kidding, this is currently retailing for almost 3,000 USD on Amazon. It was written by Duncan Scott and Gwendolyn F. M. Kestrel, who actually worked on a bunch of official Wizards of the Coast content. Monster Manual 3, Monster Manual 4, The Races of Eberron, etc. Her involvement adds a lot to the authenticity of this book. This isn't a random gooner, this is a professional writer and gooner. But is that even true? Because due to this book's scarcity, price tag, and near mythical status, a lot of people don't really know what it is. I mean, I didn't. I'd heard of it, but I didn't know what it was. Is it just pornography? Is it actually playable? Is it a good D&D book in of itself? Let's find out. Quote, "The 7 chapters of this book examine sex, sexuality, love, lust, and passion in all its forms in relation to fantasy role-playing and the OGL system." Nothing sexier than the OGL system, and that's barely a joke. The first chapter is called Love, Sex, and Role-Playing. This is mostly gentle guidance and setting the tone. It talks about how this book is not a joke. It takes eroticism very seriously, although it understands that it probably is going to be quite funny. It doesn't need to be 100% serious, as we'll see very soon. It absolutely is not 100% serious, and laughter can be a valuable tool for putting people at ease, and obviously everyone needs to be comfortable at the table. The most interesting part is at the end of the chapter, where it gives suggested sexual preferences for each D&D alignment. This is fun because it tells us what the authors think a morally good sexuality is versus a morally bad one, or a lawful sexuality versus a chaotic one. Whether you agree or not, it's pretty entertaining to read. It's kind of like a horoscope. What do your sexual preferences say about your alignment? There's also a lot of lore around culture and biology for various species. How long do elves take to give birth? What are dwarves' attitudes to same-sex relationships? What happens when a dragon has a baby? They cover loads of different species here, from elves to halflings to dragons to oozes to elementals. This type of information is not erotic or pornographic, and I suppose could inform any type of campaign. The cycle of childbirth and raising the next generation is an essential part of every culture imaginable. But who cares? At the end of the day, we are here for the mechanics. I'm a game designer, I'm interested in the game design. That means chapters 2 to 6 are the ones to explore. Welcome to Erotic Game Mechanics.
Hey, dude.
Yeah?
Don't you think this video is getting a bit sexual?
Well, maybe, but as someone who hopes to have sex himself one day, I think it's kind of interesting.
Well, maybe I can help.
No thanks, I like girls.
No. I mean, I have something even better than physical intimacy.
But what could be better than that?
3 dice!
3 dice? My Kickstarter Mythozoology just unlocked the $2.7 million stretch goal, which means every backer who grabs a physical tier gets free dice with their order. That's in addition to everything else. An epic D&D expansion with over 26 new subclasses, 16 new species, 16 ready-to-play multi-level adventures, and huge mechanical expansions. We got adorable new familiars, new spells, new feats, epic bosses, and a horde of terrifying monsters. And there's only 1 week left to grab it on Kickstarter and get your free dice. This is a gargantuan, human-first project, no AI, with over 1,000 pages of revolutionary material to take your games to the next level. Battle and summon rampaging behemoths, work together to pilot vehicles, harvest, craft, and adapt your weapons, and let your adventures impact your abilities as the legendary new Maker class. Hunt, evoke, and evolve with Heliana and Ryoko's Guide to Mythozoology, ending soon on Kickstarter. Link in description, now with free dice. Book of Erotic Mechanics. So the primary thing this book does is introduce a new ability score, appearance. This has kind of been done before. The old rules for women introduced a beauty score back in Dragon magazine. In this case, appearance distinguishes itself from charisma by basically saying charisma is your force of personality, appearance is your literal physicality. It's not just how bangable you are. Appearance covers all skill checks relating to your look, so deception checks and disguise checks and some types of intimidation checks use this stat. Some subclasses and classes use introduce this stat as well. Like the Imagist introduced in this book uses it for their spellcasting modifier. We'll get to them later. This funny table shows how appearance isn't just related to sexuality. Nymphs and succubi are very high on their appearance score, presumably due to sex appeal, but so are will-o-wisps. Will-o-wisps are just orbs of light, so unless you find the sun sexy, appearance is not just your hotness. As for how well this is handled, well, we'll talk about that at the end. Then, because this is the book of erotic fantasy, we get skills relating to how good you are in bed. For example, this table gives you the constitution checks needed to maintain sexual activity. If you're interested, 20 minutes requires a DC 10 con save. There are also new uses for existing skills introduced, which are unequivocally hilarious. The appraisal skill now lets you assess how good someone is in bed. So if you invest a ton of points in appraisal, you can look at someone and be like, yeah, you're garbage at sex. The bluff skill now doubles as a seduction skill, and the craft skill can now let you craft various erotic themed items. I think you know what I'm talking about. Gotta kind of dance around the subject, but they are in this book. Knowledge checks can be used for arcana on sex magic and sex spells. We will get to those in just a moment. And probably the most crude is the perform skill, which is just a flat, how good are you in bed? And to its credit, this book doesn't shy away from making those skills matter. The perform skill comes with a table showing how much money you can earn in a prosperous city as a sex worker. If your sexual perform skill is high enough to get a 30, you can actually earn 3d6 gold pieces per day and get a +4 to diplomacy checks with people you sleep with. There's also some obvious joke material in here, which yeah, it's a bit crass for my taste. Like there's a disease called azure balls, which only affects people with testicles. Other STDs in the book are just clearly based on real world ones, like burning release being very clearly syphilis. Other things people might find interesting include this table, which shows what species can produce offspring with each other. This is just hard biology. I guess it could be relevant to know if a kobold and an orc would make a baby if they fell in love. Maybe that could come up in a normal campaign. Then we get a bunch of feats split into two categories, general and sexual. Some of these are actually pretty interesting. For example, the Beauty Smiles feat lets you use your appearance stat in place of your regular spellcasting stat when you cast enchantment spells. That's actually a really cool idea for a feat, swapping the ability score modifier you use for certain schools of magic. I don't know how often it would come up, but this is something that if it existed in 5e, certain multi-class builds might be really interested in. Other feats, mostly the sexual ones, are just useless, like instant recovery, which says you don't require any downtime after having sex to have sex again. That's an unbelievably niche roleplay feat, and it does kind of lead to a downside of the material in books like this. Most fantasy TTRPGs are focused around diplomacy, exploration, and combat, and even if you add sexuality into your games, it doesn't remove any of those core pillars. So it's rare that you're going to want to invest points in being better in bed rather than being better at one of the core pillars of the actual game. Oh, look at me, I'm trying to optimize character builds using the sex book. New player classes. There are 3 core classes and 11 prestige classes introduced in this book, and right off the bat, that is an amazing amount of material. Can you imagine a WotC book today dropping with 3 new core classes and 11 subclasses? Literally impossible. You have to go third party to get that type of value. Hashtag Mythozoology out now on Kickstarter. The base classes in this book are the Imagist, Kundala, and Tantrist. The Imagists are full casters who, quote, parlay their physical attractiveness into potent magic. You are so bangable that you can cast the Wish spell, and that is pretty impressive. Your magic is innate, like the sorcerer, and your spell list is very cleric-coded with some arcane bits floated in. And, of course, appearance is your spellcasting stat. The Kundala is a half-caster, and the theming is kind of weak, in my opinion. It says you're a blend of martial prowess and mystical energy. It's very monk-coded. They even get flurry of blows as a core feature. This sounds like it has nothing to do with erotic fantasy until they throw this line at you. Quote, because their spellcasting powers derive from sex, Kondalas must be sexual. That is not mentioned in the class description at all. It's just thrown into a random class feature. It feels very arbitrary, and you could totally ignore that and just treat this as a kind of cool half-casting monk. Tantrist is the final core class, and they're another full spellcaster. The gimmick here is, once again, sex magic. Basically, you're a full caster that has to have sex to renew your spells. You're intelligence-based like the wizard, and you get bonus feats at certain levels like the rogue or the fighter do in 5e. The other gimmick to the Tantrist is you learn spells by carving runes onto your own body. This is pretty much cosmetic only. It's not too different from a wizard's spellbook, whatever. There's also 11 prestige classes. You can kind of think of them like subclasses from 5e, but we won't go over them because otherwise we'd be here forever. They're all adult themed and a little bit on the cheesy side for my liking. We've got like a harem protector barbarian vibe going on, a fae enticer succubus vibe type of thing. You get the idea. As is often the case with this type of stuff, it's only a minor twist to the lore and flavor, and you could play this in a totally ordinary campaign, removing all sexual energy from the entire thing. New spells. The spell section is definitely the smuttiest chapter of this book, and tonally, it might be the most important. If we take a more philosophical perspective around the game design here, this book is essentially about the near mystical power that we, as a society, ascribe to sex. Therefore, giving literal magic powers to sex and eroticism is the clearest exploration of that. I think this chapter is a very mixed bag. Orgasmic Vibrations is a spell that distracts the target with exactly what it says it does. Wet Dreams gives the target what it says it does. Cursed Orgasm causes the target to take huge damage next time they orgasm. Yes, very witty, very clever. But it's not all so silly. There are some spells that genuinely fit into this world and are actually kind of useful. Mantle of Love gives a bonus to morale saves. Peacock's Beauty gives a +4 to appearance checks for a short time. Disrobe causes the target's non-magical armor and clothing to fall off. Obviously, that's kind of funny, but genuinely useful in combat to strip an enemy of their armor. Then there's some spells that aren't really anything to do with the theming of the book and are just kind of here. Miss is a first level spell that just gives the target a -10 penalty to their next attack roll. Honestly, that's kind of interesting and something that I would explore in 5e. There are 80 new spells here, although a couple of them are just variations on existing OGL material. Back when this didn't cost $3,000, you did get a lot of value for your money. Other erotic things. There are other things in this book. A bunch of magic items, mostly stuff like armor that interacts with the appearance stat, or gimmick weapons like the phallus of the engorged satyr, which is just a +2 great club with some buffs. You've got magic staffs that can cast spells introduced in this book, and various magic items themed around BDSM gear. Conceptually, this is all very simple and obvious, but maybe back in 2003, when it was the first time it was maybe being done, it was less tired than it is today. These are mechanical expressions of the real-world social power of sexuality we ascribe to various items like boots, whips, and leather. Yes, it's very clumsy, but there is a philosophy here beyond haha penis sword. Then there's some monster stat blocks you would expect, like succubi, etc., and page 175 gives you 100 adventure hooks which all reference sex in some way. We should probably also talk about the art of this book. I've had to be careful putting this video together because the book itself is extremely NSFW. But interestingly, this book isn't illustrated, it's all photography. So it's real pictures of real people being naked, sometimes with each other. I actually find this oddly charming as someone who makes books because it's so clearly a budgetary thing. I spend a lot of money on art and I'm proud to do so, but it is sort of sweet to see this as a solution to the art budget problem back when third-party material was a lot meeker in its offerings. The potentially intended side effect of using photography is it gives this book an almost unnerving sense of reality. There is no veneer of fantasy here. That is a real man's penis on that page. Those are real boobies looking at you. It's quite in your face, almost literally in some places, which gives this book a way more intense feeling than an illustrated one like Kinks and Cantrips. Criticisms. So I think the most important question to ask is simply, is this book good? And there are big issues here. Firstly, this is from 2003, and it shows it in a lot of ways. Some terms like sex and gender are used interchangeably and incorrectly across the book, and some of the plot hooks are hilariously trite by today's standards. For example, one of the emergency situations to kick off an entire adventure is the mayor of a town announcing that they're gay. Also, as is the case with anything that goes heavily into sex, is you wind up with a very shallow pool of content, because sex just isn't really that much of a big deal. It's like if you made an entire book with loads and loads of rules around playing tennis. I mean, sure, if you want tennis in your games, you can do that, but there's not much here for when you're not playing tennis. The intrigue of a book like this is that it busts that taboo, but once that taboo has been busted, there's not much there to explore. It's just kind of generic fantasy stuff. By virtue of existing, this book makes itself and other books like it less interesting, if that makes sense. If the phallus of the engorged satyr is hilarious to you, great. But once that taboo wears off, it's just a +2 great club. And of course, taboos around sex and sexuality have been cracked like an egg in the past 23 years. Same-sex relationships might have been an edgy topic for discussion back then, but today it's just like, whatever. But those are criticisms out of time. The biggest criticism, which will have been relevant on day one, comes down to the appearance stat. This is a very significant addition to the D&D system. The problem is, I'm just not sure it works. Giant owls have high appearance, presumably because they're regal and impressive rather than being sexy. With that in mind, is a giant owl more appealing if you strap a codpiece of comeliness to its head? Mechanically speaking, yes. That owl is now more effective while wearing a prosthetic phallus like a unicorn. But obviously, that's insane. And this veers from crazy to actually troubling when you dive deeper. Children get a bonus to their appearance stat, and the book says it's because they are cute and biological instinct encourages us to protect kids. Okay, I guess, but I hope you can see how giving children a buff to a stat which is directly tied to a bunch of sexual magic and is also buffed by wearing sexual clothing is very weird. I'm sure that was not their intent, but it is the conclusion that the mechanics of this system lead to. There is a reason, I think, that this idea of a beauty/appearance stat has never really caught on in the mainstream. It just leads to insane places when you actually try to make it make sense in the context of a TTRPG. Also, a lot of the material around the biology, sex, and culture of various species, while in theory good to have, isn't that interesting? I mean, sure, this book says that elves have a gestation period of 2 years, but did you need a book to tell you that? Any GM could just make stuff like that up for their own world. It's kind of shallow writing, really. There's nothing here that's going to be inspiring entire campaigns. However, clumsiness aside, we do have to respect how bold this book is. This was published in 2003, with the Satanic Panic in full swing only a little over a decade before. To publish this type of material back then, especially for Gwendolyn, who risks her position as a writer on the mainline Wizards of the Coast books by doing so, is brave. The Satanic Panic ruined lives, and making a book like this, which is accepting of sexuality and different sexual orientations and discusses fetish content, is poking that bear in the eye very soon after it had gone to sleep. And that is kind of badass. We know that same-sex relationships are fine. We know that someone isn't made lesser after losing their virginity. But it's because of material like this making that case when it wasn't so so mainstream that we live in a generally nicer world today. So for that reason, I think the book of erotic fantasy does deserve its quasi-mythical place in TTRPG history. I'm glad this book exists. It's not worth $3,000, but I'm glad I had a flip through it. I'm glad that I understand what it is now, and hopefully you understand it a little bit better as well. For a lot of people, this book was important as a pathway to self-discovery and acceptance, and I wouldn't take that away from them for the world, even if it's really not my type of thing. And hey, if you're lucky enough to own a copy, maybe consider selling it. Even opened ones are going for several $100s online. And if you want some awesome TTRPG content that isn't directly related to orc titties and kobold butts, my Kickstarter Mythozoology is out right now. There's only 1 week left. Grab your copy today and back at any physical tier to get the new free dice. And yeah, that's all I got. Remember to like and subscribe, check out other videos on the channel, and I'll see you next time.